Hello again, my friend. It's Todd Cetnar, your mental performance coach, and welcome back to the 3 Pillars of Elite Results long-form podcast, where each week we bring in a very special guest here on Wisdom Wednesday. Well-read, well-traveled, well-spoken, well-being, well-rounded. Today we welcome in a super impressive guest in Mannat Sharma. Mannat was a former big law corporate attorney who went in-house as a New York City tech lawyer, and during the pandemic, she changed gears to find more balance and prioritize her overall well-being. She did this by creating the platform and framework called Mind, Body, Craft. In today's episode, we talk about time management, how to make a big decision, how to be present, and what she did when she faced adversity at 12 years old, being told she had clinical OCD. Let's go. Mannat, welcome to the 3 Pillars of Elite Results podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Todd. I'm super excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, my listeners know that when I bring someone on to the show, they're doing something special in their life. And I found you via TikTok, which was pretty cool. But we're going to get into all the different facets of what you have going on. But I think where we should start is let's just give my listeners a little bit of a background of who you are, where you're from, where you grew up, and we'll get to being a big law corporate attorney in a second and dive in from there. But just who are you? Where are you from? I know you're well-traveled and a lot of traveling while you were young and parents relocating, immigrant family. So talk to us about who Mannat Sharma is.
Awesome. So I am a technology lawyer based in New York City. I was born in India and moved many times before I hit age 15. So I moved to Australia right from India and was there for 8 years. And then we moved over to the US for a couple of years in Michigan. And then I'll spare you all the details, but a few places in Canada. And then we settled down in one spot where I was just outside of Toronto for a number of years until high school. And I would after high school I graduated and I decided to go to college in a different town. And on my 4th year of college, I had the opportunity to take this undergraduate Fulbright, which is awarded to a handful of people, and I was able to basically do my senior year in Washington, D.C. So that's kind of when I decided, hey, maybe I want to, come move over to the U.S. And that piqued my interest in law as well. And then from there, I went to New York City for law school, to NYU Law, and have been here ever since. It's my 8th year here. So
Wow, that's such a cool story. Now, let me just get this right from a timeline perspective. At what point did you say, like, I really want to be a lawyer, whether it was big law or in-house? Like, when did you realize this is my career path?
So there's 2 points, actually. There's the first point when I vividly remember I was in high school. My parents were driving me to school one morning in the 11th grade. And my parents are both in the medical field. My brother was really excited to be a doctor. And I knew that that was not for me. And I just decided in that moment, I just said out loud, I'm just going to be a lawyer. And everyone was like, oh, that's weird. No one in, my family had been a lawyer. That was just kind of an out of left kind of statement to make. And then I got LSAT books in the 11th grade and started flipping through them. Just like, I was like, this is it. I've decided that's my destiny. That's what's going to happen. And I kept that with me throughout college. So day one of my first year of college, I was like, I need to get great grades because I'm going to law school, in a little bit of a delusional kind of like obsessive way. And then that I say that's the first one, because the second time was I actually did a venture pitch competition. I built this startup, and through that process, I was pitching to basically like a Shark Tank, like a venture pitch competition. And we beat 200 teams to the top 3, but we didn't win because of an IP issue. And that really got to me. And I was like, well, this IP law thing needs to be figured out. Right. And that's when I decided, like, there's a huge intersection between business and law. And I just wanted to explore that a little bit more. So I think that was more of the adult decision when I really had a little bit of education under me about what law is.
I got you. Yeah. So you're in high school. Obviously, you're young. You're a teenager. You're saying to yourself in 11th grade, I'm going to be a lawyer. Now, we're going to get into some of the things that changed in terms of the pandemic hitting you, and you changed gears a little bit to find some balance and prioritize your overall well-being. But like from 11th grade to when you got that first, I shouldn't say the first, but when you got that big law corporate attorney contract, you're there. You fulfilled a dream since high school. What did that feel like to you?
You know, in the moment, I sort of, I don't know if you relate to this, but sometimes when you're just going through the motions, you're so focused on your goal, the goalpost just moved at that point. It's like, okay, I got in. Now I have to get to be like the best associate possible. So when I look back, I didn't really take a moment to celebrate because I was just so, it was like, we're here, we're on to the next. But I do remember there was a really big moment for me when my first day at the firm, because it was the firm I wanted to go to. It really was like that dream job. And I was sitting like at my desk and I didn't have any work. It was the first day, but that's when it kind of sunk in like, wow, everything I know is in another country, like, so many miles away. And I'm just like here on the 47th floor of this building, like I'm a lawyer somehow, and it really did kind of sink in for a moment there. And then, I was like, all right, let's get to it. We've got to be the best we can be. So.
Yeah. We're going to get into the framework you created, which is called Mind, Body, and Craft in a minute. But now that you look back, do you wish you took some more time to smell the roses and say, wow, I did it? I've been working on this since 11th grade, and I am at one of the largest global law firms in the country. Like that gratitude piece. Do you wish you did it a little bit differently?
100%. Throughout the entire process, like you mentioned, from high school through college, because I really worked that same work ethic. I did 12, 14-hour days in college throughout. And I never really, I also didn't, I really only prioritized that in some ways. And I wish I did take a moment to have some gratitude and also like celebrate life's moments. That's actually something I'm working on right now, is celebrating life's moments, because I think I'm just hardwired to be able to be like, okay, we did this. Now let's, we've got 3 other things to do. And just taking a moment to stop, like really reflect on how far you've come and like how great this moment is.
Yeah.
That's something I am working on. So I do wish I had done that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think it's part of the journey. It's like, yeah.
I completely relate to you. We're very similar in the fact that like no matter how big the goal is, once you get there,
Yeah.
you knew what you did to get there. So to your point, you've made a great analogy. The goalpost moves. It's like you're done. Most people say, "Wow, she got there," or Todd Cetnar, now he's playing professional basketball. They didn't see the hours I put in behind the scenes or the hours you put in behind the scenes to know you knew you're going to get there because you put the work in. And so you have that next step or go forward mentality, and you don't take a step back and say, you know what, I really did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question I have for you next is, who gave you that work ethic? Like, where did this work ethic come from?
It's a great question. I'm a lawyer. My younger brother's 2 years younger than me. He's a doctor, and he just got in yesterday to one of the most competitive residencies in Canada. Wow. And so I think about this in sort of like a nature nurture, like where does this come from? Since we're both pretty driven, but we're very, very different personalities. And my theory is that our parents were immigrants from India. Like I said, they first immigrated to Australia and so on and so forth. They grew up in very small villages and very humble beginnings. And from a very young age, they never actually told us to work hard. They never said to us like, hey, you should become a this or that. They were very trusting in us in a kind of a unique way. I think a lot of immigrant parents tend to kind of put their dreams on their kids. And our parents were very like, we trust you to figure it out. But what we saw was very important. We saw that work ethic. I've seen my parents work incredibly hard since day one. When my dad was doing his PhD in Australia, my mom had 3 jobs, and none of them were what she was qualified as in the medical field for something far more. But she she was working at like a cheese factory, like, and just, doing so much to get to where they are. And then we also saw their success because they did find success, kind of this like quintessential American dream way. They really got there. And that was in our really formative years. And I think just watching them, the hours they put in, this work ethic that they had, just we felt like we not that we owed anything to them, but it was like, how could we not, how
Yeah.
we have like such an amazing opportunity. How could we not work so hard? The other piece I think is, I don't know if you feel this way too, but I really fall in love with the process because the goalpost keeps moving. I'm like excited to learn. I'm excited to become the best at this thing. I'm really curious about things and I do like the process. And I think that's why there's not really a destination, because once you get there, you just keep going.
Well, you just hit the head on the nail of a question I was going to ask, but it's the reason why you're on this podcast is you give me chills as a mental performance coach telling me you're in love with the process, because what most people don't understand is they're so focused on the outcome, they forget about enjoying the process. They forget about understanding that the journey is maybe more important than the result, the end result. And
Mhm.
so for you to understand that and understand that probably at a young age, watching your parents do the same thing is really, really cool. I saw a post on TikTok. You posted, I think it might have been you and your brother at that house. Maybe it was in India or Australia, that one house,
Yeah.
in where you are now
Yeah.
in New York City high rise. Such a cool post in contrast to where you came from and where you are now.
Yeah, that was actually in Ann Arbor, that when my dad was doing his postdoctorate. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was a really cool moment for me because my family, we all went over there, and just like seeing our old house and seeing where each of us, including my parents, like where how far everyone has come.
Yeah.
And I think at the end, the thing that really like like held it for me was that we were so happy then, and so like it's kind of like being like you said, it's not about where you get or not the result. It's like if you have your people, you have gratitude, and you have like you're in love with just where you are in that process and that time. There's really not much more you can ask for. And I kind of it was a really special moment for me to be able to be there. And I don't take anything I have today for granted.
Yeah, no, and I can see that from your posts, which is they're so impressive and you're helping people and serving people. So what would be the advice that you would give someone who is maybe in high school like you were, or maybe they're in college now and they understand that their dream is to be a big law corporate attorney? What would be the advice that you would give them to find success in that arena?
My advice would be to really set yourself up for success. So if you know early on that that's your goal, have that goalpost in mind, then work backwards. What are the things that you need to put in place now to set yourself up for success? And a few of those things would be, if you're currently at a point where you are studying, making sure that you're getting like really doing your best to get those grades. I don't believe that you should strive for perfection, but if you can really put in the work and when it's necessary and make sure you get those grades, that's a huge piece. Studying for the LSAT. Their law school is a big numbers game. So making sure you have those numbers, and it is a lot of it is the work ethic. I mean, I don't think I'm more intelligent or more talented than anyone out there. I truly think I always say, like, I'm not the smartest, I'm not the fastest, but I'm going to work harder than all of you. And
Right.
that was sort of like my mentality. And almost to a fault, there's a point at which I should have slowed down, but just making sure that you put in that work. If you have that goal, that vision, I really believe it's there's no way you're not going to get there, if you really like put in that time, that energy. The other piece I would say is keep an open mind to opportunities, because very rarely is a career path linear. There's always
Yep.
points of where you kind of do get derailed. Maybe you don't get into law school, the one that you want right away, and you take another job and you apply again later. And there's in my story too, there's moments where I was like, I don't think it's going to be law school, and then I came back to it. And so just remember that it's okay to have this like long-term goal, and when you have setbacks, like you always say, it's not what happens to you, it's what you react, it's your reaction, how you handle it.
Yeah.
So just making sure you're keeping an open mind, you're keeping open to possibilities and options. And I think just like you working hard, those are really the main pieces that I would say.
Yeah, I love the theme behind, and I talk to my clients and my listeners know this. I use the term progress over perfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you strive for perfection, you're going to find yourself in a heap of trouble because there's no such thing. But
Right.
there is progress, and you have to look back. And where gratitude comes in is look where you started from and look where you are now. You're never starting from the beginning, and then you continue to go from where you are. So I love that concept that you just described. You know, we just talked about the picture in Michigan, but now you're in a Parkview high rise, big name clients, fancy dinners. You have the dream, but the dream from the outside, what everyone thinks is going on, what they don't see in reality is long hours, nights and weekends. You're missing family parties and birthdays and, and holidays, and you're stressed. I see that a lot on your post that you made of making this decision. You were stressed, you were anxious. The pandemic hits. What made this decision to change gears and say, you know what, I need to take better care of myself, and here's how I'm going to do that? Talk to me about that.
I think when you've been running for so long to your moving goalposts, it's very hard to press pause and to slow down, especially if you're, like you said, like I said, in love with the process in the moment. When I was working as that corporate lawyer, like it wasn't all stressful or bad. I was working a lot. I was one of the highest billers in terms of hours in my group. But there were moments that like I said, was obsessed with being so good at what I did. And so it was really hard for me to take a step back and actually evaluate and examine my life at that point. What the pandemic did was really force me to do that, because it not that the hours slowed down, but I had to leave New York City. I went back to my parents, and I think just being in that environment and really like facing the fact that we have this global issue we're all working through, it sort of made me think, like, what am I doing with my life? Because at that point, when I was at my parents' house, I was on a deal that I was up till 5 a.m. for 5 nights straight, and was up again for 8 a.m. calls. And I'm working the whole time. It was really brutal. And even just watching my parents say, like, we didn't want this for you, but what's going on? And it sort of forced me to take a step back and really think, like, what am I doing here? And what's my why? Because so far I had just been like going. And my next goalpost was partner. And I didn't really stop to think, is that something that I actually want? I don't think I gave myself permission to think about what I really wanted. And so for the first time, I had the opportunity to just take a little bit of a step back and reflect and really examine. And I do think there's this quote, like, the unexamined life is not worth living. I do think having the ability to step back and kind of look at your life holistically, take stock of it, was important. The other key thing that happened was that people who I really respected in the group, mentors, partners, really, really key people in my circle, started to leave the firm, and they were feeling the same thing. They went to different places, some went in-house, some went to other firms, but there was something that sort of clicked in me, that all these smart people are thinking that there's another opportunity, nothing that it was bad at the firm, but just that there's another opportunity that they're interested in, and they're evaluating their life. Maybe that's something I should be doing. And so I started to really like take a step back, and also look at my health and my overall life, not just my work. And I noticed that there was some really big holes there. I had a physical exam, and it was not great. I had from the stress, from this lack of sleep, from the 6 coffees a day, I had heart pain, like bradycardia. I had really bad vitamin levels, and I was eating healthy, working out almost every day. I was taking care of myself in certain aspects, but really neglecting myself in other ways. Right. So seeing that holistically was a huge wake-up call.
Wow. Okay. So the pandemic comes, and you're still in Big Law at the time, right? Because you're not anymore. So I'd like my listeners to know where you are now. It's a 2-part question. You left Big Law, where you are now. But I think the transition from Big Law to, we call it is it in-house? Is that the correct
in-house?
Term? Mm-hmm. In-house is this creation of the framework called Mind, Body, Craft. Mm-hmm. And for my listeners, and I'll let Mannat talk about it, mind means the internal piece, body is the physical piece, and craft is your passions in life. So talk to me about how that helped you transition out of Big Law into in-house, and how you're using Mind, Body, Craft today.
Absolutely. So it was around January of 2021 when I started to think about really, like, what would I want to do next? But I was having some struggles because I didn't have like a framework or a way to think about my life holistically. And I would search up, the templates and resources, and nothing really stuck with me, because it was very like, relationships, yourself, career. And I didn't think about my life in that way. So that's where Mind, Body, Craft came is I wanted to try to do one thing each day in each of those pillars. And because I did I cared a lot about my career, my passions, and craft isn't just your career. It can be anything that you're excited about, what makes you feel human and alive. So I realized all I had was my job. I should probably pick up some hobbies. And through that process, I really started to realize like there is a life outside of just this one career and this one job. And in November of 2021, I left the firm, and I say that so casually. It was a very big decision, but I decided to leave the firm, and I went in-house to Meta, which is where I am now, which is big tech company, formerly Facebook. And I'm doing very different work, which is part of this transition. And when I was really thinking about my craft, what I wanted to do, the work I do now is much more aligned with my strengths and interests, and that was by design. So I'm helping teams build new products in the tech space, and I just take a legal lens to do that. And that's much more collaborative, and it's a lot less looking at contracts, which I'm happy with. So that's one piece. I am working on other things as well, and that's kind of where TikTok came to be in April of 2022, this past year. So it hasn't been too long, but that was an accidental, really cool opportunity that came up.
That's cool. So obviously through Mind Body Craft, you saw a dramatic increase in the
Yeah.
quality of your life, which you talked about on a couple of your posts. But like, give me an example, especially with the holidays. People get so stressed over the holidays, right? So give me an example how one of my listeners would use Mind, Body, and Craft for a holiday season to kind of de-stress themselves of families and parties and all that stuff.
So I have a resource in my profile as well, but basically the idea is think about the next month, and it can be starting today, the next 4 weeks out, and really take stock of where you were last month and where you've been, and kind of how you're feeling, what you've been spending your time on, and really take that examination kind of lens, and then write down one thing that you want to do each day if you can for your mind, everything internal to you. That includes your emotional well-being. So I kind of bucket in even relationships there. Like, what do you want to do? Maybe you want to start seeing a therapist once a week. Maybe you want to, what I'm currently doing is morning pages. So the first thing when I wake up in the morning, I write down what's on my mind, and it kind of like, it's a brain dump of all the emotional and everything on a piece of paper. So, that could be an example. Or, maybe you just want to, give in the holidays, if you're not near family, you want to call your parents, FaceTime them more, something that's really taking care of what's internal to you. And then for your body, that's your physical body. I think especially in the holidays, it's tough to be able to, it's a lot of stress to be able to work out and also, maybe eat healthy. There's so many, great holiday foods you want to indulge in, but maybe it's not those things. Maybe it's just, for me right now, it's stretching a lot. I just want to, I feel a lot of tension in my body these days. So like, getting to de-stress. Maybe you want to get a massage. Maybe you want to just cut down a little bit on your alcohol this time of year. It really is personal to you, but thinking about what can you do to really take care of your body during this time without, obviously, like, I don't want you sitting at the holiday table not eating, but some way to kind of find balance there. And then for your craft, I think this is really important during the holidays, because sometimes it's so busy that we kind of neglect everything that's sort of exciting to us. But trying to find time for something that you're passionate about. Maybe it's, like a hobby you haven't done in a while. Maybe you want to, start writing, and you just want to get back into creative writing. Maybe if you're into more of the, you're maybe considering like videography and photography. Maybe the holidays you want to start, making little home videos or taking pictures, just something that you feel like is a cool project for you. I always think of it as like, what's this project I'm working on this month? And it's really important to do something for your passion and yourself and like what makes you tick. So that's just like it really is personal to each person, but that's an example of kind of how you could think about it. And then, you want to try to do one thing each day. If you can't do one thing each day, one thing each week, at your own cadence. But I promise you, once you start and you have that framework and you really like remind yourself to do those things, at the end of the month, you're going to feel a whole lot better.
Yeah, no, that's really good stuff. And I don't know if any of our listeners follow Steve Harvey, but Steve Harvey had said once, every goal he's ever written down, he's accomplished. And so, Mannat, you just talked about, you write down the things that you want to change, or you dump things early in the morning on a notepad because you get it out of here and onto there. Talk about, speaking about writing things down, one of the things I saw in one of your posts was how you make a big decision. I'll refresh
Mhm.
your memory just in case you're not sure, but you talked about writing down, starting by writing down what the barriers are. And once you unblock those barriers or you didn't have many more, you write what you call an MVP process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Because I feel like, we have, whether they're small, medium, or big decisions, we have to make decisions every day, no matter what arena we're in, whether
Yeah.
it's parenting, the corporate world, it doesn't matter. And what I found from the post about you making big decisions is you take everything that's in here, and this is where all stress happens. You put it down there and you reverse engineer what it would look like minus the barriers. And if you did this
Mhm.
versus this, you're weighing options. Talk about that process. It's really cool.
Yeah, of course. One of the big issues that happens when we have life decisions is we think that we only see the blockers and we just think that, if it's cost, it's too expensive. I can't do that.
Right.
And this is kind of a way to find one, what you really want, and two, how could you actually implement that? Because 9 times out of 10, there's a way. So what you do is, like exactly as you said, whatever the life decision is, and usually there's multiple options of paths that you can take, put it down on a piece of paper. It's so important because there are so many studies about how powerful it is to write things down.
Right.
It's just too difficult to organize it in your brain, no matter how clear-headed you are. So putting it down on a piece of paper, I literally would write, here's the issue, and then, here are all the roadblocks for this life decision. And I would even write, like, get as detailed as you can. And just make sure you have everything you could think of that could possibly be a roadblock on that piece of paper. Then I want you to think about, what if those were not roadblocks? If money was not the issue? If you could somehow be in two places at once? Like, really get creative with if this was a solvable problem. And then what tends to happen is you'll see a few different versions, like those paths we were talking about. You get to kind of see yourself in each one. So I can give an example right now. I'm feeling like I want to be closer to my family.
Right.
And so I wrote down all of the issues, and one of them is money. I mean, am I gonna get two places to do this? No, I can't be in two places at once, et cetera, et cetera. So I write all these down and I realized, okay, my dream, my ideal world is actually for me to be able to, like, if they were in New York, if I could still live in New York, but they could be down the street from me, that would be my absolute dream.
Yeah.
And that helped me because made me realize I don't want to go to where they are necessarily. Or maybe I don't want to, have a spot in two places. That's actually not a lifestyle I want. So you really get to figure out, in your ideal scenario, what would you want? Then you have to think about scaling that ideal scenario, because it's going to be pretty outlandish. Scale it back to what is the MVP, the minimum viable product, the simplest component of that life that you can put together. And the MVP is like a concept from product development that I borrowed, but just that is exactly what people will do. If you have a product, they'll just put it on a piece of paper and pretend it's a phone, and you kind of workshop prototype it. So what could be the simplest way of getting that result that you want, which is actually, like, for me in this case, is to be able to, like, what I want is to be able to go over to their house for dinner, or just like go shop whenever I want, to be able to have that, like, closeness. What's the simplest way that I could do that? And so what you will find when you do that is that, yes, some of those roadblocks will still exist, but not all of them. So maybe what I actually just need to do, I realize, like, oftentimes I could just throw money at the situation
Mm.
and make it better. I just don't, it feels like such a burden, but I could do that. And then what that makes me realize is, if I throw money at the situation, it gets better. Maybe I, look at my budget and I realize, oh, okay, actually I can scale back this and do this. And suddenly we have a solution.
Yeah.
That's just like one example, but the idea is just that there's usually a simpler version of that thing, and what you want to do is start doing that now, immediately, because you don't want to wait, and keep getting stuck in this loop of this terrible decision and never actually make a decision. Start getting the smallest thing, and then you like inevitably start to feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
And work towards that big goal.
Yeah, that's incredible. A lot of people make these split decisions so quickly and then they regret it.
Mhm.
But I love the process, right? You always have a process behind your strategic thinking. It's very cerebral, which kind of leads me to the next question. And I meant to ask you offline, so we're going off the cuff here on a couple of these. And what it is with regards to time management, you talk
Mhm.
about time blocking, time bundling, and time batching. And I don't know if time bundling and batching is the same thing, but explain to our listeners what that means and how you use those.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with efficiency. I've always been obsessed with efficiency. I think, time is our most valuable asset. So if I can make my productivity higher so I can do the things I want to do or just do things faster, I'm going to do it. So I learned a lot of this when I was in corporate law. I'm very grateful for that because I was working, 100-hour weeks and I had to be able to do everything I needed to do. So the neat thing about the first one, the time blocking, is that there are studies that show a lot of our brains have a hard time focusing through when we have multiple transition periods frequently throughout the day. It's really hard for you to get into a state of flow, essentially, if you're there, can only do it for 10, 15, 30 minutes. You have to really block out time. So if you can, and I was able to even do this in a job that is so like just there's new things coming in all the time. If you can just block out your day, and I do kind of like morning, afternoon, evening, or you could break it up into a little bit smaller chunks, but block out sections in your calendar and try to focus on, one the key issue that you have in each of those blocks, and it should be a different thing in each block. I apply this for studying too. I used to do this when I was studying because then you don't get fatigued by one subject, and your brain is constantly you're abreast of all the different subjects, and you don't feel like you're just doing one thing all day. So it keeps things interesting as well. So you want to time block. And I also like to, if I can, move my environment within each block. Sometimes it's tough if you have it one desk and that's all you want to do, but maybe you're just shifting your space over just a little bit and it just kind of triggers something in your mind, like, okay, we're doing a new thing now. And if you can do a small break in between those, just get some food, whatever, in between those blocks. So that has been a game changer for productivity. The time bundling is kind of a hack too when you have to do something you don't want to do. So that's bundling something you don't want to do with something you do like to do. So for me, that's like if I'm studying or working on something, maybe it's as simple as just getting like a really great playlist. Like, so you can spend the time to get a really great playlist together that you love, and you can just like jam out to that while you're doing work. Maybe you, if you're going into the office and you have some office work to do, you get coffee with a coworker after you're done your time block. It's kind of just trying to pair things that you don't want to do with what you do want to do, or just being like, if you like working at a coffee shop, okay, I'm going to do this paper at a coffee shop at this place I really like, and I'm going to get my coffee, and then I'm going to feel like better about it. And then the time batching is kind of similar. It is similar to time bundling, but there's also the idea of making sure that whatever you're doing, it's the kind of a combination of the time bundling and time batching, that you have batches of things. So let's say, if this is tough to do in all scenarios, but sometimes when I'm creating content, I will sit and I will batch out like everything I need to do, like 6 videos in like 3 hours in one go. And so you've kind of like taken multiple things that you might have to do over many days and put it in one slot, and you're just going through it. Tim Ferriss does this, where he has like one day where all he does is meetings. The next day, all he does is focus work. If you can just batch everything into one piece, it can really help your productivity. So those are just a few different examples of things that I pick up with. I don't do them all the time. It's just like tools when you need them.
Yeah, that's great. I think I just stole from you my next post: time blocking, bundling, and batching. So thanks for that. And I think I stumbled on time bundling because, my listeners know I got into endurance training, and when I don't want to do long runs or long bikes, especially here in the Northeast in the winter, I'll put on Suits, one of my favorite shows at the moment.
Yes.
That's just a lawyer show. So I'll watch a show I want to watch, which actually gets me excited to go down in the basement and get on the bike, because I'm doing something I like to do, even though I'm not, totally ready to get the workout done. So that's pretty
100%.
cool to understand the word. You started to answer the question by saying you're obsessed with efficiency. So I want to talk to you about something we talked about offline. You faced adversity and you overcame it, and you continue to work on it. But you told me off the record that you dealt with a obsessive compulsive disorder, and my listeners, I'm sure all of us have some sort of that. and all of us have some sort of adversity. And for anyone out there that also kind of suffered from or has suffered or is suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, I know I have a little bit. You and I were talking about it as well offline. But would you mind sharing your story, kind of where it started, how you figured that out, and what you've done to really work on it and overcome it?
Absolutely. Yeah, OCD is a term that we use quite frequently, like lightheartedly. And the when you have a clinical OCD, which is what I struggled with when I was younger, is a pretty debilitating experience because one of the things that happens is it bleeds into all aspects of your life, and it can be similar to other mental health issues. It can really deteriorate parts of your life that you really care about. I was 12 years old and I was diagnosed with clinical OCD, which just means that it's the kind of it's OCD in a form that was you know did have negative consequences on other aspects of my life. I was obsessive with specific rituals, and I could not do the next thing until I completed those rituals, even if it meant taking a test. So that's an example of where it could bleed into another part of your life. And
Sorry to interrupt, Mannat, can you give my audience an example of what that looked like?
So I had many, many rituals, but one was before I took a test, I had to tap my feet together a certain number of times, twist my foot, and I had to kind of angle my foot on really uncomfortable way, and crisscross them and kind of angle them in a certain spot. And then I have to scribble my name on the test sheet in a way that was like really aggressively scribbled, which was not great because the teacher couldn't read my name. But I had to do all of these things before I could write the test. That's one example. I had a ritual with my like stuffed animals, my pillows, before I was able to get into bed. I had a similar ritual before I was able to get into the shower. Every time someone left my house, even to go to the garage, I would blow them a certain number of kisses in a certain like cadence. And that's when my parents were sort of like, what's going on here? Because I could be working, I could be on a phone call, I would run as soon as I heard someone leave the house. And so it's sort of like there's not really logic behind any of these rituals and behaviors. I know some people have it with hygiene and, like washing their hands a certain number of times, but people with OCD are really obsessed with numbers and having things in a certain order and doing a certain ritual before they do something else. And there's a little bit, at least for me, superstition behind it, where I thought something terrible would happen if I didn't do this thing. And even though the logic isn't there. So I was very young, obviously. I didn't really know what was going on, but it started to it was impacting friendships because I would do these things with my friends around, and people just didn't really understand what was going on. So I did start to feel really bad about myself as a kid at that time because I didn't understand what was happening, and I also couldn't stop. So I just was like, I don't know what's going on, but I can't stop this thing. And that's when I was able to get help with the help of my family. We were able to see a number of doctors and kind of understand a little bit more about what this was. Labeling it was really helpful. I think for a lot of people, labeling whatever you're going through can be very helpful. And we we did a number of things to kind of help reduce. It was more of a reduction of that clinical OCD to a point where I wasn't doing those rituals in such an obsessive way. So we were able to kind of stop that pattern of behavior from happening. It took some time, and it took a lot of me like breaking down, because I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the ritual, but like without, there's not really words to describe that feeling, but it made me feel like something terrible was going to happen if I didn't do it, but I was forcing myself not to do it. But over time, we were able to overcome that piece of it. What happened later was, I think, a lot of that overcoming the adversity piece, which is like, there were remnants of OCD that stayed with me for many, many years. And they become disguised as like insane work ethic, or as like being obsessed with something, and they become your crutch. At least for me, it became a crutch because I knew that if I needed to get something done, I just kind of go into that obsessive zone and it would get done. And so what was really hard was in the last couple of years, actually stopping that altogether and stopping the obsessive. Every time I feel myself getting really like obsessive with something, having to reframe, and it takes a lot of therapy and time. And I was so scared for a very long time that if I did that, I wouldn't be successful, because I thought it was like my secret weapon. But in fact, there is work ethic, and then there's like obsessive, it's a very different thing I've learned. And you can have great work ethic and know when to press pause and know when to slow down, which is why it's something I talk a lot about now, and knowing when to give yourself rest, because if you don't, your body will do it for you. And just like knowing where your limitations are, reminding yourself that you are still a human being, you're not a robot quite yet. So there's that piece in the later years was really challenging to sort of like let that part of myself go and trust that I would still be able to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, interesting story. And so are you still, what are you doing now as an adult? Are you still working through some things? What are some strategies used today versus when you were 12 and realized what was going on?
I am still working through things because it manifests a lot in anxiety. It manifests a lot in being obsessive with my diet and exercise. When I was in Big Law, I was not taking care of myself. I was very underweight and I was not eating enough. I was exercising too much, all of those things.
Right.
Like I said, it's not like I just became obsessed with work. It was everything. It was my relationships. So it did really impact me as an adult. And even to this day, the tools that I use is the mind body craft framework does really help me, because it's sort of like a forced balance. It's using that, like you said, I'm obsessed with process and having a framework, but it's using like a process to get myself to balance, because I probably won't do it myself, and making sure that I don't get too obsessed with one thing, like the body. It's not just body, right? There's other pillars I have to work on each day. So making sure I don't go too far, and also just really, I am in therapy. I'm a huge advocate of therapy. Even having a life coach, someone to be able to kind of help you get through moments in your life. But I think the biggest piece of what I do now is I really take stock of myself once a quarter, and I make sure, like, if I'm going too obsessive into one thing, TikTok's an example. If I'm thinking I need to make 5 TikToks a day and they have to be absolutely perfect, and this becomes everything, I've got to slow down. So it's just really like giving yourself the time to pause and reflect, and have a little bit more of like a holistic balance has been really helpful.
Yeah, that's incredible. I heard you say life coach. Now that we know each other, if you're looking for a new mental performance coach, here I am.
Love that.
Throw a plug in there.
Yeah.
So we have a cool alignment. You use the term pillars a lot, whether it's mind, body, craft, that's 3 pillars. One of the things I know about you is you have these 3 pillars in the morning, where you do 3 things in the morning about gratitude, hydrate, and working out. Just talk to the listeners about, again, what I just listed and how that helps you kind of get ready for the day.
Yeah. The gratitude piece is so important. I have behind me on my nightstand a little cue card that's taped that has a list of things that I'm grateful for, that that's the first thing I look at before I look at my phone. I just look at that list. I remind myself that I'm grateful to be where I am, and that all the little things is what I really remind myself of, and that just gets me started on like a good note during the day. And then the second piece is like hydrate. I mean, you get dehydrated overnight, and I think like hydration is a surprisingly huge problem for a lot of people, like really making sure that they're hydrated. So that's the second thing I immediately do. And then I work out in the morning. It's something that I have found has been just so helpful for mental, physical, everything. I'm not always doing the same workout. It doesn't, some days if I'm not feeling it, maybe it's just like a long walk or something. But right now I'm really into strength training and building muscle. And it's been really fun to see myself get stronger. So like it's almost like you get a goal right in the morning and you get to check it off. And just doing those, I'm not a huge fan of very complex morning routines, just like 3 pillars, and you can customize them to what works for you. But those 3 are ones that right now have been really helpful.
Yeah, no, and I truly believe in 2 things that you kind of allude to. Is one is, in order to have a successful day, you gotta plan tomorrow today, right? I'm sure you're changing up the gratitude card, and you're ever changing things to day by day. And the second thing is, I call them AM and PM routines. And I believe your PM routines dictate your AM routines. And if you win the morning, you win the day. And you call them the 3 pillars of the morning, which is really cool. So, I think it's so important to have that strategy and that structure, because this goes back to time blocking. Like, you're blocking time for gratitude. You're blocking time for working out. And with the workout piece, my clients know I call it sweat before screens, meaning before you open up that laptop, before you look at that cell phone, turn the TV on, go do you.
Yeah.
Go get that sweat in, get your mind and body right first, because you're not going to be able to lead yourself and lead people or work with people if you're not feeling great yourself.
Right.
20 years ago, that used to be selfish. Today,
Mm.
it's selfless, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to get yourself right first. So that's really cool that you do that. I've got a couple other questions, and then I'm going to put you on what I call the hot seat. And we're
Okay.
going to give you rapid fire questions to end this podcast and to see how you do. And it gives our listeners a chance to really know who you are on another level. But the first question I have is this: if you were to define yourself in one word, what would you choose and why?
Resilient.
Okay. Tell us why.
Because I think it encapsulates, that word encapsulates being able to take on challenges. And also there's, I think, a component of like working hard to get out of it and like being okay in the end. And I think there's been a lot of times where I've been down, and being able to just not let that impact my long-term trajectory. That's, I think, something that I have just deep in me. And I really can't think of something that would happen that would completely destabilize me.
Yeah, that's really cool. Most of the time when I ask someone that question, a guest, that they answer it, and then like 24 hours later, they email me, they're like, I wish I said this, but you were
Watch
very,
that.
you knew that one. Yeah, that was good. All right, here's another one for you. If you could sit across the table from 3 people, dead or alive, who would you choose and why would you choose those 3 individuals?
Wow. Wow. Okay. Is this supposed to be a rapid fire?
No, this isn't. You can take some
Okay.
time, dead or
Okay.
alive. Like, why? I'll let you think a little bit. Like, what would you want to talk to them about? Or what would be the question you'd ask them that you're just yearning to know?
I'm going to pick, I know, okay, I'm going to go one by one. So I think Gandhi would be a really cool one, because he's a person that I've always been interested in, and he's also, to me, seems like a very complex person, but has found a lot of what seems like peace in himself, and has been able to overcome just like biological, like just normal human, hunger, and just his stopping his whole life for in service of something he really believes in.
Yep.
And I think he just did that in a really unique way. So I think I would want to ask him just like what like a conversation about how do you get to that almost like monk like state,
Yeah.
but you are a complex person. You didn't grow up that way. And
Right.
so how do you get there? Second person, gosh, I'm trying to think of someone who would just have awesome stories that I would want to hear about,
Right.
just like a really cool life. Maybe Einstein. I know that's like a little bit.
That's a first. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be really just. I just want, I like just understanding like his mind, how he approaches things, and also like I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that he didn't work insane hours, and I'm just kind of like curious as to like, is he just, obviously he's a genius, but like I don't know, I think it'd be a fascinating conversation, and also like his life story would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Third person, okay. Third person I feel like has to be someone who I want as like a mentor. Maybe this is tough because I'm like, I have to pick someone that like.
You might be emailing me in 24 hours.
I know, I probably will. I'll probably change all of these. Because everyone is a complex, maybe controversial figure in some way, but like
Sure.
okay. I'm gonna say Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
Because Tim Ferriss is someone who I I would love to meet him one day. He's been really influential in my life, and I have borrowed a lot of his principles, and he's also had an evolution that I think mirrors a little bit of mine. And he's obviously, I think he thinks about things in a way that I really appreciate. So
Yeah,
I think it'd be him. I should have
that's
picked
great.
a woman on the three, but I'll change my answers
It's
later.
all
Yeah.
good. We could put it in the show notes, your fourth person.
Yeah.
I love Tim Ferriss. I've got Tools of Titans behind me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great
Awesome.
big book. But yeah, really cool. All right. So final question before we get to the hot seat. If you could give the teenage version of Mannat a piece of advice, what would you tell her today?
You don't have to suffer to succeed. You
Interesting. Tell
won't,
me where that's
yeah.
coming from.
She was suffering in a lot of ways, and she put herself through a lot more work, and like just there was a lot of stress there. And she was in high school and she didn't need to do that. And I think she thought that, I'm speaking like the third person now, but I think at the time I thought I really thought I needed to feel misery in order to be successful, because you hear those messages a lot, like you need to just grind. And there is a version of grinding that does that you like. I wish I could have had the mindset of like, no, like love this process and like, but take care of yourself also. And I just didn't have that balance in mind. And I think I was so scared I wasn't going to be successful if I didn't do that. And I think for a lot of people who I mentor, who are kind of around that age, I like there's a lot of stress in them. And
Yeah.
and I think obviously there's people who don't have the work ethic at all. But if you're in the camp of like you're just wired that way, you're prone to just carrying a lot of that stress in like those beautiful years. And I think I would just say, like, you're going to get there, you're going to be successful, you don't have to suffer through it. Like, try to, like similar to what we were saying, try to have gratitude, like have some fun, and like be a little kinder to yourself.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And all the clients that I have, everyone comes to me stressed. And, the terminology I use is if you're stressed, you're not present. In order
Yeah.
to be present, you got to be where your feet are. You use the term just be here, which is
Yeah.
really cool concept. So I hear you. Stress is it's a major problem in the world today, especially post pandemic. The level of stress just went, twofold, even more, maybe 10x. And so that's a great answer. All right, we're gonna put you on a hot seat, and then at the end of the question, what we'll do to wrap it up is I'm gonna give you some parting words to give to our listeners, share some insight that you would love to share. So, are you ready for the hot seat questions?
Yes.
All right, here we go. If you could pick one last meal that you would ever eat, what would it be?
My mom's pizza that she makes.
Awesome. Favorite smell?
It's gonna be so specific. The Hotel Wynn in Vegas.
I
That
get it. They
lobby.
blow that scent out. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'll never forget that scent. Yeah.
I like the Venetian because they give that sort of scent out too. So that's interesting you said
Okay,
that.
I'll check that out next. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. All-time favorite movie.
Oh man, I don't know. Maybe Fight Club.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. How about all-time favorite TV show?
I don't watch a lot of TV. This is gonna be bad. It's not gonna be a good one. It's gonna be like something I watched in my childhood. So probably like the OC.
Oh, that's wow. The OC. Yeah. That's like Beverly Hills and
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's yeah.
That's funny. What is your current favorite app on your cell phone?
My current favorite app is yeah. Probably this is gonna be so lame. Canva, the Canva app
Yeah.
itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
I'm
use
doing
that.
I'm learning new skills in that right now.
Gotcha. That's cool. All right. And then how about what is the current background on your cell phone?
It's a picture of me and my boyfriend. It's in black and white.
Awesome. And do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires you, you repeat in your head or tell people about?
Success is not the result of spontaneous combustion. You must first set yourself on fire.
Interesting. Do you know who said that?
I don't.
You
I
could
learned
just
it
say
in high
you. It would have been that much
school.
more impressive.
Yeah.
All right. What is the last question on the hot seat? What is the one song when you turn it on, when you hear it in the car, if you're in the gym that comes on automatically just gets you fired up. You want to dance. You got energy and enthusiasm. What's that song?
Heat Waves.
Who's that by?
It's by oh my gosh, I'm forgetting their name. It's not an artist I know anything about other than Heat Waves. Glass Animals.
Heat Waves by Glass Animals. Interesting. I'll have to listen to that.
Yeah.
All right. Parting words. The floor is yours. What would you want to tell my listeners who now got a chance to know who Mannat Sharma is? What's the last thing you'd want to leave them with to maybe inspire them, maybe give them words of wisdom or some insight or strategies or structure?
So I thought about this a little bit, and I think what I would want everyone to think about is, so if you're someone who is working towards a goal and you have a vision, it's amazing if you can get really clear on that vision and really try to understand what you want. But what's I have found is really important is to, in that process, while you're working towards that vision, know that it's okay to change your mind. It is okay to derail yourself, to take a step back. And it's also okay to kind of take a pivot during that process. And I think this is really important because when we have a goal in mind, we sometimes get so focused that we think it's just this one track. And we then like going back to everything you talk about, then we let those setbacks really get to us. But if we can accept that, hey, I might change my mind, I might come up across a new opportunity that, I'm open to, that is not exactly what I thought it was going to be, but it's something different.
Yep.
And if I can accept that adversity is going to happen to me, and I'm just going to be resilient and I'm going to overcome it, that I think is truly how you get to where you want to be, because that vision might change. It might look a little different. And I think that's something when I, was laser focused in corporate law, if I had I would not be in the life I am now if I had just stuck to that path, if I hadn't been open to those changes, those setbacks. So just keeping that in mind while you're on this journey, I think that's how you're going to get to where you really want to be.
Yeah, that's huge. And I'll piggyback off that. I tell people all the time, the idea in life is to turn adversity into your advantage and to understand that a bend in the road is not the end of the road. And a lot of people make that mistake. And so, Mannat, it's been amazing to have you on the podcast for the past hour. A lot of insight. And we appreciate you sharing your life. I think where we should end it is, where can we find you? I know TikTok. Let's talk about your social media handles and best place to follow you and continue to listen to your message.
Absolutely. I'm Mannat Please everywhere. So MannatPlease@gmail.com is my email. You can always reach out to me. Mannat Please on TikTok and on Instagram. And there's more socials coming. So thank you so much for having me, Todd. This has been really fun.
This has been awesome. So should I end it by saying, Mannat, please? How does it go? Mannat, please.
Mannat, please.
Please, Mannat, please.
I will, yeah. Mannat, please.
Thank you so much. Today is up to you. Take inspired action. And don't count the days, make the days count.